Okay, we're going to get started. So thanks for coming and joining us again today. I'm Kim Schroeder, the Career Advisor for SIS. I realized I didn't introduce myself. What? Okay. I know, but I had said I wanted to do it a little earlier because we got out of the other one earlier, but I wasn't sure if it was set up. So I have to wait. All right, I understood. So we're going to get started in just 30 seconds. She said 24. Thank you for counting that. I appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Oh, for anything, for sure. May I begin? All right, well, I don't want to hold it up too much because we have speakers at 1:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm career advisor and I do workshops a couple times a year. So we did one for prepping for the career fair for the first time this year, and that was really fun. I think that was helpful. But I wanted to just talk to you because I also have aside from the library science background and the archive background, I have a marketing degree. And so there aren't enough of us with a business background in the field to just kind of come in trained on budgets and marketing and publicity and how to market yourself even to get a job. So I want to make sure I'm sharing some of that with everybody that's out there looking for a job. So let's talk about that a little bit. So there's definitely things that you can do to get ready. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from employers, and they talk to me a lot because they'll often ask me to recommend someone, is that they'll interview someone and you folks really haven't thought about commonly asked questions, don't have an answer for why do you want to work here, so those kind of typical things. So it's a process you want to go through, so you can't go unprepared. So I would make sure you spend some time on the career advising link. So it's on our SIS webpage. If you email me, it's also in my signature line, so that way I'm kind of promoting that. But we've got commonly asked questions on there. We've got helpful tips for phone interviews. We've got some resume examples. We've got lists of sites you might want to check out for job hunting. So there's a lot of material there. And I'll be every summer, usually I kind of revamp that a little bit. So I'll be working on that over the summer. So you definitely, of course, are going to check job postings, but you also need to do a self-assessment about what you offer, okay? And I think that our field attracts a lot of really nice people, which is a great thing, right? Except a lot of you really struggle with how much is expressing what kind of employee you would be and how much is bragging. And so a lot of people are really uncomfortable with just plainly stating what they offer as bragging. And so what I tell you is an employer is not psychic. So they don't know you well enough to know what kind of employee and what you would offer. So you have to spell it all out, okay? And they need that. And think about it, if they're looking at 100 resumes, they're not going to look back on one conversation they had with you one time and say, oh yeah, I remember she did that. You've got to spell everything out in that resume and that material. Participating is really important. I must have a discussion about this every day of my life. So participating in professional associations, participating in student associations, going to conferences, writing a poster and having that up at a professional organization. These are all things that both increase your visibility and show you're a participatory, committed member of our field. That's the way you meet people. I don't want you for a second to think that you have to go be the biggest extrovert and meet every single person at a conference. That's not what we're saying. Just do things to stay in touch with the field, do things to increase your skill set, do things to meet some people. If you go to a conference and meet 1 or 2 people, that's still a win. So, don't put too much pressure on yourself, but definitely I see professionally written papers come across my screen every semester, and I say to that student, you should really publish this, and it almost never happens. So there are things you guys are creating as graduate students that are of value, that I'm saying are of value, that you probably, if you really looked at it, realize it's a value, and you could be sharing and reincorporate into a presentation or a blog post or a poster session. So really, I think we need to do a better job of making sure you guys feel really confident that you're sharing intelligent information. You've done the research. You're a good writer. You have an important take on that topic. So I really want to make sure that you guys feel empowered too. So you really want to analyze the job postings, and it's kind of like indexing and abstracting. So if you're looking at a book to index an abstract, you are pulling out the most important parts of it to describe and to include, and it's the same thing for a job posting. So you're looking at a job posting, there might be 20, 22 skills listed in some of these, right? You can't speak to all of that. For one thing, it's highly unlikely you would exactly match all of those things. For another thing, your cover letter would be a novel, right? And so would your resume. And so you've got to be able to understand and assess what are the most important things they're looking for that you also can sell that you have, right? So they might have 5 things that you keep seeing repeat, and you think, okay, these are the 5 skills out of the 22 that are most important, and 3 of those I can really support that I have that. Okay, so that's how you want to approach that. I also talk to students all the time that say, gee, I don't have that one skill, and I think it's really important. And you know what I say? Look at YouTube, look at Wikipedia, look at some of the free sources for training we have. There's some online courses that are free. There's web conferences. There's all these kinds of things out there where you may be able to get something going or do a little project to get more familiar with that technology or that process, whatever it is. So definitely you can show initiative that way. When I have highly technical people working in our field in jobs like a web development job or a web librarian, when they come to talk to my classes, they often say, I didn't learn everything magically in library school. I showed initiative. So I went and bought, Python for Dummies, and I logged myself away for a weekend, or CSS, or, Drupal, or whatever it is. So there's some initiative you can show, too, to learn everything you need. So here's a job posting from some job postings from Indeed.com, which is one of the ones probably I use most for trying to keep an eye out for what skills employers are looking for. And if you look at some of these, they've really defined things into what's preferred, what's required, and so you've got to kind of balance that. And this is a little easier because it's already kind of broken down than a normal job posting. And I'm going to hurry through this a little bit because I feel like I'm running out of time already. So that's a long job posting, and there's a lot of things that you can break down. When you do your self-assessment, okay, you need to look at what your interests are. There's lots of personality tests you can take out there to see how you work in the workplace and what speaks to you. Any internships or volunteer projects or anything that you do, not only build your resume, but help you to decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And maybe what you don't want to do might be most important, because you don't want to move across country and then discover, I hate cataloging 24 hours a day or 40 hours a week. It's too much. Okay, so you want to make sure you understand that, maybe you want to do something different, or maybe you want to do cataloging 20 hours a week, but you want to work the desk another 20. So it helps you to understand. The other thing is breaking down all your skills, and that might include volunteer management, that might include community work that you do, but all of those things make sense for this job market. And what your values are. So you heard from Crystal Jolly earlier. She's got really strong work values about making an impact on Detroit youth. That comes through loud and clear. That's her career value. Her career value is that she wants to help her city at the same time she's garnering and growing in her career. So you've got to think about what you want to obtain. So one of the things that I had a student tell me at one of our workshops, so I thought was a great idea, is she and another student were getting together every Sunday morning for coffee, and they would take one of the questions from our career advising page that has commonly asked questions, and they would work on the answer that they each would have for the week, and then they would get together and answer it in front of each other, and then they would kind of grade each other and say, oh, well, that's good, but you know, that might spin negatively because of this, or you forgot that you also do this, you could add that in. So they were just kind of job hunting buddies, and it was, I thought, a really nice way to get more comfortable with the questions in interviewing. And that, along the same lines, you could do with resumes and cover letters. Now, I look at them, but it's also good to have someone close to you look at them who say, you know, you're really underselling that you did all this community work and that's not on there. Or, you know, someone that knows you best that will say, wait. And so a lot of times I feel like I'm a journalist when I'm working with students and alumni, because I'm asking them all these questions. Well, what exactly did you do in your undergrad? Well, did you do any community work? Do you have any links to projects or papers that are, you know, would fit into this job? And so you want to make sure you're including that in here. So there's a lot of those things where you're really trying to think about all that you are right now and how those skills you've developed, whether in school or out of school, will formulate you to be an employee. So participation, we say it in orientation, I say it all the time in career advising, just be present, right? Was it Einstein that said, you know, 90% of success is showing up? You really just need to show up for things, attend meetings, and go to things. I will tell you unequivocally that the students or alumni that contact me a year after they've graduated that don't have jobs generally slammed through school and didn't get active. So get involved in our profession in some way. The employers, if you look at surveys, not just in our field, but in any field, want to know you can apply what you're learning in school. And so when you're dealing with public service, they want to know you can handle yourself. They want to know that you're not going to be rude to a client, a customer, a patron. They want to know that you can handle the archival material carefully. And so you've got to prove yourself. And it's an example, my friend who manages internships at Library of Congress said to me, he said, we don't send nurses out into work with patients without having done nursing assistant work, right? You work in the hospital as well as in the classroom. And it's very similar, and it's the same thing. I think that should happen, you know, with UX. You want to make sure that you're showing that you can actually do this work and not just learn in theory, and any type of information management, because what we're trying to create uniformly is access to information. So we might organize it, we might preserve it, but for sure what we're all doing is creating access. Definitely make sure you're connecting with your instructors when you're getting ready to graduate and let them know that you're looking for work. That's really important. Make sure that you are doing anything you can think of that's hands-on. It doesn't have to be unpaid. If you can find a paid internship, great. We have our digital media projects lab if you're local. So I have projects in there. I know we're going through a bit of a change in the lab because we had some building issues, but we're getting new computers, and so the lab's going to be going gangbusters over the summer. So if you're interested in projects, let me know. Visibility, we've got our SIS blog, and we get a lot of information on there. If you're job hunting, you might want to just look through what the alt spring break and practicum students are saying about their experiences at different institutions. It'll give you some insight as to what you may or may not want to do. Strongly encourage you to publish your coursework or work with another student or a faculty member to do so. So we're here to support you. Every single faculty member would be happy to talk to you about recrafting something that you've worked on. When people contact me to look at their resume, the first thing I ask them is, what's your ideal job? So that I have a sense of where they want to go, okay? And that's especially true when I have an alum contact me, is I kind of want to know, okay, we've been out for a little while, what do you want to do? And I ask that because life is really short and you spend a lot of time at work. I don't want you to just get any job. You're probably not even going to be happy in it. I want you to get something that's really going to make you happy. And so let's craft your resume and your skills for what you want to really be doing with your life. And so you really want to, any of these things up here will help you immensely in getting in the job market. And so you really got to look at that. I will say that Metro Detroit is tighter on the job market than other areas, and that's because we have the two schools so close together. So I also often ask people, are you tied to this area or are you open to moving beyond? Because that obviously affects some of us as well. I got a resume the other day with their high school and their graduation date on there. I said, you do not need that on there, right? So you really want to focus on your resume on what applies to that job. So I often encourage people to do a section called relevant professional work, and you can pick and choose out of your life what makes most sense to include for that job. And that way you're indicating to them, you're not including, you know, everything that where you worked at Burger King, you know, so you're moving on. Now, if you worked at Burger King and you were a manager in customer service, that might be something different that you would want to include. But I'm talking about, you know, average entry level sort of high school Burger King, we don't need to include. But you could mention that you have a year of customer service in your cover letter, because that is applicable. So it's really looking at focusing your skill sets on how they relate to this field or the job. And so if you look, I've got some workshops online and some PowerPoints that talk about that, or I'll be doing some more workshops. But you think about how you could phrase something, and then I work with you to make sure you're emphasizing what you really got out of that job. So I was working with somebody that was working retail, and she was just putting that, you know, she was a customer service person at Macy's. And I said, well, did you organize anything? Did you deal with any information? Did you get any awards while you were there? Well, then it turns out she was getting increasing responsibilities. That's important to put down. That she was employee of the month several times. Well, that's important to put down. You know, so even if it isn't a direct information professional job, she's got skills with people that are important. It's very important. So it's you got to think about including all of that. So obviously you've got the tools. So what do you want to communicate about who you are? And I'm going to start going really fast now so I don't hold up Stephen and Kathy, but make sure your master's degree is at one line on your resume. Make sure that you're including a composite of really who you are. They want to know that you're stable, that you're a team player, that you show initiative. I mean, that's pretty uniform for almost every job. So think of ways you can express and convince them that that's who you are. So you need to, even before you go into a job interview, think about anecdotes where you solved a problem at a previous job, where you innovated something, where you dealt with a problem customer, where you solved a technology problem, where you trained for technology, something where they say, oh, that skill is portable to this job, and that's great. And a lot of us tend to say, somebody says, oh, thank you for doing that, and you go, oh, it's nothing. Well, it is something, and it might be more than other people might do. So make sure you're expressing that. Here's an example of reading a job posting like I was mentioning. So here's my translation. So on the left is kind of what it says, and on the right is what they really want. So they really want a can-do person who's pretty flexible, right? Because it's kind of a lot of things they're looking for. Okay, so being able to really read and digest and analyze the job postings will help you to write the cover letter in the tone that they're looking for an employee. Keywords or phrases: dependable, works well with others, respectful, flexible, technology skills, decisive, independent, and I would venture to say hip, right? Because we are fighting lots of stereotypes in this field, and it's important for you to be on top of technology, to be understanding what consumers are looking for and how that's portable to your environment. So whether you're designing websites or whether you're dealing in a traditional library or archive setting. So cover letters, definitely there's a lot of things in here, and we can post this, but you want to make sure you have a technology skills section in your resume or cover letter somewhere, because that is just so highly valuable. And, you know, America values that so much. Resumes, you don't have to include years for everything you did everything anymore. So if they give you a job application, then you may have to, but for your resume, you don't have to say what year graduated high school or college, how long you were somewhere. You could put the number of years you were at a place. But people are pretty understanding now that people take time off for health reasons, for caregiving, for child rearing, so that's understandable. Oh, here's an example. I did include it, sorry. So, you know, sales associate, sorting clothing, putting up sales items, etc. You know, this is the lower is my change. So you don't want to lie or misrepresent, but generally what I see with our students by far, I don't think I've ever seen anybody over-represent themselves, is we underrepresent. So we really undersell ourselves. So I wanted to give you an example. References, definitely. I encourage people to include those in their application materials, even if they haven't asked, so don't tell anyone. But the reason I do that is it's purely psychological, that if you have really good references, then I would include them even without them asking, because they can't unsee it. So, and we're such a small community that they'll say, oh, well, Dr. Holly recommends her. You know, I know Bob, and he wouldn't do that unless he really thought highly of her, so I'm really gonna take her more seriously. That all might be going through the back of their mind, and they may not verbalize it, but it helps. So I strongly encourage you, if you've got, you know, really solid references, to include them. So be sure to prepare stories, as I mentioned, and here's some examples of things you could think about to include. Follow-up is hard. It's one of the hardest questions it is for me to answer and for you. A lot of people have been taught to follow up with a thank you card after an interview. I totally agree, but you're getting people now saying we don't want any follow-up. And then you're paralyzed because you feel like good manners would be, you know, to send a follow-up. So if you have someone and you can send a handwritten card, I totally would do that. But these days you don't always have that, especially if it's a phone interview. You might have one email address, but not everybody's, but you could at least send an email that way. I still think that a thank you is important. Big mistake is most common is underselling yourself, and secondly, I see lots of resumes from the previous career that you had. So I see lots of great teaching resumes, but if I'm looking for an information professional, I would not hire you because you have not convinced me you're an information professional. You have convinced me you're a teacher with an MLIS. Okay, so you've got to rewrite your resume and your previous jobs to think about it. And there'll be hints. So if the MLIS or the MSIM is your thing, there'll be hints in your previous jobs that this is where you're heading. So were you the one that was always solving the technology problems in your previous office, and then you decided to get an MSIM? Were you the one that wanted to try to do a database for your office? Were you the one that was always organizing things and knew where everything was? So there'll be indications in previous career of where you were headed, and you can make sure you're pulling those things out in your resume. So I did this little form that we might want to do. So basically, you have to develop your brand, right? So you have to have the Paula brand or the Bob brand, and you need to figure out who that is, okay? And only when you do that self-assessment can you convincingly sell yourself to an employer. You have to know what you're offering. So you have a master's degree, that's great, but what do you offer from that? So just because you did the coursework, you need to be able to sell yourself as a brand. What do you offer? You know, I show great initiative because I started, you know, a teen advisory group, or I started, you know, a gaming group. I worked with my community on environmental activism and arranged all the volunteers and, you know, protests, whatever it is. But you need to make sure you're expressing what your brand is and what differentiates you. So you could include accomplishments, you could do unique skills. So these days, you know, not when I graduated, but you could say, I'm really good at Fortnite, and so I would really be able to connect with youth, okay? So, and then remember me, reinforce. What would you want to reinforce at the end of an interview and you leave? What would you want them to remember about you? Or they've read your resume and cover letter. What's the takeaway? Think about it. They have read 100 of these. They have talked to 3 people. What is it when you leave out the door? Do you want the search committee to sit down and say, well, you know, he or she really impressed me because blah, blah, blah. What is that about you that you want to make sure that you're conveying? So here's one I just kind of filled in to be fun. So developing your brand. So this is the Katie brand. So project directed, understanding of technology applications, strong communication skills, was able to successfully work with a long-term problem patron by, you know, whatever you do, excellent writing skills, you know, understanding users' needs, and then supporting that, okay? So developing your brand. Did you have a tough group project, and were you the one that jumped in and tried to work things out? So you can talk about that. So that's a valuable skill. I see lots of eyes rolling on that. So unique skills. Maybe you know Python. Maybe you beta tested a new application. Maybe you have personal involvement in social media tools, whatever it is. So you want to try to express that. You know, maybe you're the social media manager for your organization, and so you want to put that in. So, and as a remember me, a takeaway, maybe they're going to remember you're a positive problem solver. That sounds pretty good, right? So that's what an employer would need, right? Or understand outreach in both traditional and new ways, strong communication and patron interactions, whatever that you feel like you want that takeaway to be. So feel free to contact me. You know, I'm here to work with students and alum. And I would say we have, 400 students and thousands of alum, and I see about 100 resumes a year. So that's a lot, but it's nowhere near what it probably should be. So feel free to use me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Feel free to nudge me if you don't hear from me right away, because I have many hats in case you haven't, to garner the theme of the day. But I definitely want to try to work with you. Several of you I have worked with. And keep me informed. The best thing in the whole world is when I get a note from a former student that says, I got the job. I mean, that's the best. So, and I wish that for all of you. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. I think so. Well, I think so, because that could, fit into a programming. That could make you an expert in programming and, some kind of fitness for your organization. So that could be, but I think that's, sort of, in a sense, community involvement, that if you're a yoga instructor, you're working with people, so I think that you could frame it that way. And I think that when I see certifications in technology or other things, it just shows that you're a go-getter. And so that all is part of you as a whole, and I think that would be good. Anybody else? Okay, thanks everybody. I want to introduce Stephen Bowers and Kathy Wolford, who are going to talk to us again about getting involved and working with the Michigan Library Association. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wolford. I want to reiterate everything Kim said. I wish I had heard when I went to library school here because it's very valuable information. So, I am Kathy Wolford. I work at Wayne State University for a library consortium called DALNet, and we are stationed over in the undergrad library. I think I'm pointing the right way. I don't know. On the second floor. And what DALNet does is we run the library systems platform for 16 area libraries, and right now it's the products from Ex Libris, which is Alma Primo. So I'm here today with my boss, who is Stephen Bowers. He's the executive director of DALNet, and he's also the interim associate dean? I never know if it's associate or assistant. Associate dean of the Wayne State Library System. So we're going to change it up a little bit. Every year I've been here, and I haven't been here for several years, but we focused on MLA, and I thought this year we're not going to have any PowerPoint slides because we know you're probably tired of looking at them. You've been here all day. So we're just going to talk a little bit about networking with various groups. And we both do have MLA, Michigan Library Association experience, because we both are past presidents. But we're also going to explain how we got involved with we used MLA as a stepping stone to get involved in other groups. So I want to keep this really informal, and I'm going to be really quick. I'm going to not try to read too much to you. My initial experience with networking was with the Michigan Library Association, and I became involved with that as a new librarian because I used to work at the Henry Ford Museum in their archive there. Even though I was a librarian, I was the librarian. But my boss was involved with the Michigan Library Association because she was a public librarian. So she was the initial person that introduced me to people. I had a very nice experience as a new librarian. I met lots of people that were new librarians and got to know lots of people. I went to the Michigan Library Association Leadership Academy, and I'm still friends with a lot of those people. Down the road, whatever you want to do, I think a leadership academy anywhere, even if you don't want to be a so-called leader in quotes, leadership helps you in so many areas. So further down the road, I would look into some kind of leadership academy. It doesn't have to be through MLA, a lot of good ones out there. So after all of my experience on committees with the Michigan Library Association, I was elected in 2013 to be the president, which was an honor, and I also learned a lot from running a board and running meetings, and I think it's very good to learn about how different libraries work. It gave me exposure to public library situations, especially since I've never worked in one. I was at a special library before I came here. That stepping stone was eventually I got involved with the American Library Association, which is a much bigger association than Michigan Library Association. And I have volunteered for various committees, which I initially became an ALA member through the dual membership that is offered here, and Steve's going to go into that. It was an ALA-MLA membership. So back in the day, and I won't tell you when, that's how I got involved. So ALA, you have to be a little bit more patient with the volunteer process because it's a big organization. So you can volunteer and not hear something, and you may not get the exact committee you want to be on, but I've always said yes to any committee that I've been asked to serve on, and I've learned a lot from all of them. Some of them expect you to work very hard, and others not so much. It's just like anything else in life. But the best thing out of it, it's taught me things that I never would have learned in my job through DALNet. I have learned a lot. I see things through various different eyes and different perspectives by being involved in different associations with different people. So I don't know if you know anything about ALA, but it's a huge organization with lots of divisions, and I've been involved in some of them. I've been involved in LEDA and Alex and ACRL only 1 year. But eventually, I felt more comfortable with the one called LLAMA, which stands for Library Leadership and Management Association. So it was sort of trial and error with me to figure out what programs I liked and what people I felt like I had things in common with. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm always having throat issues. So, last August, I was really surprised when I received an email from an ALA committee, it wasn't LLAMA, from the Office for, I always have to look this up because it doesn't flow off the tongue, Office for Information Technology Policy Advisory. And they offered me a committee position until 2020. And I'm going to read you the charge, even though it's quite boring, but it'll tell you a bit what it's about. It's to advise on priorities, policies, and strategies for the association that promote the development and utilization of electronic access to information, to provide an ongoing channel for member communication, working closely with other units, committees, and officers of the association matters touching information technology. So OITP is one of the committees I just learned, one of 3 committees that is run out of the ALA Washington office. All of the committees I had been dealing with before were out of the Chicago office. The new director of the Washington office has shifted focus, so he wants the OITP committee to work with COLA, which is the Committee on Library Advocacy, and COL, which is the Committee on Legislation. And if you ever become involved with ALA, you will learn that the acronyms will never run out. They actually have a sheet of every acronym. It's very confusing, especially when you're new and they're throwing them out and not telling you what the acronym means. But that's when it's good to have a phone in front of you and just like Google it quick. Oh, that's what they're talking about. So my first experience with the OITP committee was at ALA Midwinter this past January in Seattle. And I can honestly say, with all the years I've been involved with ALA committees, I really, really, really like this committee. This has been my favorite committee, and going through all the process was worth it for this committee. So I learned so much from attending a 2-day workshop in Seattle. We had experts from Google and from Broadband USA, the U.S. Department of Commerce, which sadly she couldn't even say she was working at the U.S. Department of Commerce because at that point she wasn't because of what was going on with the shutdown in the government. But anyway. That's a digression. And from Stanford University. So the discussions were about cybersecurity, the upcoming 2020 census, which is one of the first, it is the first census that's going to have an online component to it. So especially public libraries are going to be very involved with that. And also about broadband initiatives. We live in a section of Michigan where we have good access to broadband, but not so much when I started hearing about what other people go through, especially in rural areas, and that includes the Upper Peninsula. So I will be going to the ALA conference in Washington in June, and I look forward to working with this committee more. I'm going to be introduced to the other committee members of the other acronyms I mentioned, COLA and all that. So I like having this excitement because it gives me a new outlook on, I've been at Wayne for 12 years. This is just something different for me to focus on, which is great. Not that there's anything wrong with DALNet, but sometimes it's nice to have a different perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, but before I wrap it up, I want to sum up why I think networking is important. You learn more about your profession. You learn from various different perspectives. It has educated me on various legislative issues throughout Michigan and now throughout the country. And it has enriched me to become a more well-rounded and better librarian at DALNet. So thank you. And we'll take, by the way, we'll take questions after he's done. I'm sure you'll have a few.
So Kathy didn't mention that networking starts now when you're in your courses. She and I met a while ago in grad school. And we still obviously keep in touch, ups and downs, but that was a great connection we started with each other, and then both of us have had different jobs, not with each other, but we were connected still with each other. We were on a board together for Delnet before both of us worked at Delnet, all because she used to watch me fall asleep in class when we, and wondered how I still passed every. No, I'll take. She also didn't mention, which I was going to talk about a bit, but I'll mention now since she just spoke. A lot of our work leads you to other things, and you can think of it as networking. So Kathy has done some great projects with ALA or in our office, and last year she had a big article that she was invited to publish. So that was a big national thing that was kind of exciting for all of us, I think. So you can plan out some of that, but you can also just do your work and be yourself, and it will lead to other places. So it's not like we had everything in mind. So you don't think, it's good to try to map things out, but it just happens sometimes. So don't panic about that. So Kathy talked a lot about her committee work and stuff, and I've had similar experiences through both MLA and ALA and other groups. But you have to be willing to, as I already said, start your career now. So act like you're already working a job. Act like the work you're doing now, even if it's studying for a midterm exam that you don't want to do, or all that is prepping you, and it will be connections later on. So when you're, with classroom people, whether it's your instructors or the other people you're meeting, those are all connections. And it's not just for your own benefit. How are you going to help other people when they need to call on you? So it's all, since we're librarians, we're all in it together, for everybody's benefit. I wanted to talk a bit about conferencing, or going to conferences, and say if you've never done it, don't be afraid to try to do it. I know it costs money, so that's an issue as well. But just like your courses, you should prepare for those. So don't just show up in Chicago because it's nearby for annual conference and say, what am I going to do? Try to pre-plan or talk to other people, talk to Kim, talk to me, Kathy, whomever you have access to. Because like ALA is a good example. They have a whole thing called the scheduler, and you can search by keyword for all the events and all the professional activities that are going to be happening at conference. And it's really good to look at that other than the night before when you're in your conference hotel room. And there's several things that I'll mention about the scheduler. So there's obviously presentations. Some will be good and some won't. And you can even, there's some people have put out like guides for going to conference. But one tip about scheduling, put 3 things at the same time slot. And, note the one that you really want to go to, but if you go there and it turns out to be a dud, it's okay to get up and go to something else. So you don't have to be stuck, like right now in this session, you can leave if you want. So I always do that. And you never know, certain things get canceled, or like I said, they might not be what you thought, or they might be really stinker. So it's good to keep your options open. Or you may just say, I wanted to go to that puppet thing, but it sounds totally lame now because I did something like that last night. I'm going to go to something else. So use the tools they give you. A lot of times there's an app, which I never like the app as much as just doing it online, but I'm old. So if you are going, if somebody's sending you to conference, make sure you go to the things that they're sending you to do because you don't want to be in trouble when you come back. So, prioritize your schedule. Start with filling those things in. But there's also a lot of social events. You don't want to get back and find out that you missed the awesome EBSCO party or something that you could have gone to. Obviously, besides presentations, there's meetings. So if you are on committees, those are all like work commitments. So you can't really blow them off unless you're ill or something. Unless you have multiple committees at the same time or something, then they understand that. But you should communicate those things back to the people that you're on the committees with. Because that's all part of your networking. They'll remember if you participated. If you do actively participate, again, that's like a job, and they will call on you to do other more important things, or maybe things that you're more excited about. Because to start out, you might get on committees that no one else wants to be on. And that's okay, put your time in. And you may find out you do like it. Like, I always got stuck on the bylaws committee for all of ALA. And I'm like, this is cool stuff. And that's because everybody else is like, what? I don't think so. So I got to chair that eventually because I was, and that made me think about, in general, in life, you can, they might tell you, don't think you're above someone, which is good advice. You should never think you're above someone, but also don't think you're below someone. You should treat everyone with respect, whether you think they're above you or below you. And you should expect that from everyone else, which is, you know, touchy-feely, I guess. But it's really how it needs to be. So like on the bylaws committee, I was established professional, but I got on as the intern. So you don't have to think anything about that. Everybody has their role. You know, if other people don't treat other people appropriately, that's their problem. But you should focus on you looking towards everyone else and everybody working on everything together. So that's a trend I wanted to talk about today. It's connected to networking, and Kathy mentioned it some. Whether it's through MLA or ALA, both of those organizations are to serve all libraries and all professionals within our profession. And there's a lot of different titles in there. There's special libraries and K-12 and you know, academics and publics and others. But the trend nowadays is that all those groups need to really start working together. I mean, so I don't know if you've heard the news lately that the past 3 years, I think, that they've proposed federal budgets. And this is not being political, the president's proposed budget eliminated all LSTA funding, so the Library Services Technology Act. And it's small dollars on the federal scale, but it really enables, you know, a lot of general public computing at all public libraries. Now, why was I mentioning all that? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And that reminds me why I was talking about this. Pardon? Sure, sure. So the federal budgets that were proposed for the past 3 years have initially started out proposing eliminating the LSTA funding, which is the federal level funding for Library Services Technology Act, and other library and museum funding, the IMLS, thank you. Institute of Museum Library Services, yes. So that's a big deal, because if those go away, so Kathy was saying too, even in the state of Michigan, LSTA people think of as public libraries, but it funds $1 million worth of databases statewide in Michigan for everyone to have access to. So a lot of our smaller colleges and universities, that is their core collection of databases. So everybody in the state of Michigan and elsewhere throughout the nation benefits from those monies. So the trend nationally and in Michigan, Kathy and I and others have been pushing this for several years now. All libraries need to work together. And that's part of our networking. And because people get into their camps. I'm a public librarian, I'm an academic librarian, which is our two big camps, and the K-12s. And in Michigan, for a while, those have been kind of separate camps. But there's more and more people talking about how we need to all work together. So the LSTA stuff was a good example federally. ALA has helped organize, you know, a call to action nationwide, and then in each state, the different groups are trying to, you know, try to get our people. We're lucky in Michigan because, like Debbie Stabenow is leading the letter of appropriations from, you know, against the president's proposals that they want to actually strengthen, you know, funding and stuff. So Michigan's usually okay on that. We never know from year to year. But all of that, even at the state level in Michigan, really starting to work together. So the Michigan Library Association, which Kathy and I were both involved with a lot, is really the strong arm of working on legislation within Michigan. So they work to get budget increases each year for all libraries in Michigan. LSTA is interesting because the state has to match funding if they want the federal funding. So if they're giving us $10, we might have to match $10. So sometimes the legislature has to be reminded, like, you can't cut the $2 million from the state or we won't get the $1 million from the federal. That's a big deal. Like, and then usually, no matter what political party, if you can show them how it's actually bringing more money, then they're interested in that. And a benefit for our profession is that everybody likes to tell their, you know, people in their hometown that elected them that they support libraries, for the most part. There's a few weirdos out there, but we don't know who they are. So in Michigan, too, another example of why we need to work together. And hopefully, anybody doing K-12 prep to be a school library media? Maybe online, I don't know if we have anyone. So I'm not saying this to scare you, but over the past decade, those positions in Michigan really got gutted because they were seen as, we need to cut funding from the state level. Who are we going to get rid of? We don't need a librarian. We can leave the doors open and the kids can go do what they need. Anyways, so that was a sad trend in Michigan, which they've been working the past 5 years to really kind of reverse. So there's legislation being introduced in the current legislature to require certain positions for certain size public schools, to have a certified library media specialist, not just a volunteer parent that's willing to check books out. So there's a new coalition in Michigan that's all part of networking that we need everybody to be partners on this. Because the Michigan Library Association is well known by the state legislature at this point, because we actually pay for a lobbyist that helps us do work each year to get certain things passed. So eventually, if they've got the K-12 legislation now, they want to know, what does MLA think about this, or why are you not speaking on this? So MLA's board, did a formal statement that they supported the legislation, and all that's in process. But even though we think there's separate libraries, the general public is like, a library, I like libraries. So they don't know that academics have a different call number system than public libraries, et cetera, or that there's different types of libraries. They're just libraries. So that's a big reason why networking is important amongst all the library types. I don't know, I'm going on and on that, but so I want to tell you, whether you're looking at associations or your coursework or other preparations, you should follow your interests, and that's both professionally and personally. So I love the question about yoga. Totally, if I get an app and somebody says I do more than nerdy library things, then okay, that person's worth a second talk. Or yeah, like Kim said, tell me how the yoga fits in with dealing with people, or what do you have to organize when you're doing the yoga stuff. It's just good to be multifaceted. You shouldn't be only your job. So within ALA and MLA somewhat, there's different groups called divisions, roundtables, and interest groups. And all of those, so like at the ALA level, the divisions would be the other big associations like the Public Library Association, or LAMA, like Kathy said, the Library Leadership Association, Management, yeah. Which maybe, several of those groups are talking about combining anyways, so, but it doesn't matter. So those are the divisions. The roundtables, though, are more like groups that aren't a whole division, but they might be cross divisions, like, I'm trying to think of good examples of, yeah, LGBTQ roundtable. It's just people interested in that subject, either professionally or personally. So that group does events or programming together. There's all kinds of roundtables that you can be, intellectual freedom. So anything in your jobs and just as in your interest. And then interest groups are even more informal, so they don't get necessarily funding from the association, but they're free to join, so that can be a bonus. And those are, as their name implies, things that people are interested in within our profession. So like there's, I think, a recent one on, I'm trying to think, we just approved it on I'm on the committee on organization, another thrilling. Anyway, we just approved it's not an interest of mine, so I'm forgetting the name. Like manga and stuff, not comic books, what do you? Graphic novels, thank you. I'm sorry, everyone that loves graphic novels. I'm not against them, anyways, they had a very good group of people that wanted to do stuff, so, we approved that group. So it's just whatever you want to get plugged in with. All of those groups, though, the roundtables, the interest groups, and divisions, again, if you're going to a conference, you can look usually by those specific groups and see what activities they're having, so that could be useful. A couple of interest groups that were really more the active groups that I did things with at conference are just interest groups, so they don't have formal things. So for our job at Delnet, there's an interest group on automated library systems. That's our core service at Delnet. So I always found it very useful to go to that group because it's only other people working on the exact thing we're working on. The same for, like, there's a consortia management interest group. So I found it very useful to go to that and talk to other people leading consortium offices to see what are current issues. And a lot of those interest groups are just going to be informal chit chat at the table. So anybody can speak up, anybody can ask a question. I always kick myself because I don't make a comment or ask a question that I really should. And then either it doesn't get asked or somebody else asks it, and everybody's like, that's an awesome question. I'm like, it was my idea. Why did I not ask? So I just say don't worry about it. You know, there's everybody at every table is afraid to say something. Just go for it. Like, yeah, and it's the same for a job. Like Kim was saying, go for it. You kind of have to brag if you want to get a good job because they need to know that you're the person that would be awesome. It's not, anyway. Yeah. So we kind of talked about it again, but volunteering on any of these groups or in associations, even if it's just, you know, counting people in a room, because they do different assessments at conferences. But you do that for two purposes at least. First of all, to help out with what they're asking, but it's also helping yourself out. Again, they're going to remember that you were the happy person that volunteered every year to set up the AV when no one else would do it. And it really does make a difference. So as you're starting your careers now in your classes, volunteering people gets you out there. You know, at the state level, if you don't want to leave Michigan, they need to see you at the statewide things and know who you are before you're looking for that first job. Really, Kim mentioned doing either a practicum or an internship, paid or unpaid. That, for so many people, is either leads to a job at that institution or puts you higher than everyone else that just graduated because you're the only one that actually worked somehow in a library before graduating. So all of that is really important. And it sounds like a lot of work because it is. You have your jobs already as students enrolled. You may be working multiple other jobs, which I get. I did too. Kathy did too. We both had full-time jobs, right, when we went to grad school. Yes, yeah. Yeah, Kathy did it all, but right. Now she's waiting for grandkids, right? Anyways, there's also both a MLA and ALA and other groups. There's mentorship programs. Llama has a great one. And again, don't be afraid to be on either side of that type of relationship. If you feel you've learned something, volunteer to be a mentor to other people. Even as a student, you could do that. If you want to say, I want to provide mentorship on what to do when you go to your first conference or something, you know, you can come up with ideas that people might not be thinking about. But on the flip side, be willing to say, ooh, I want to talk to somebody and get all of their awesome information. And most of those relationships, I mean, you might find out if you talk to the person that they're not really talkable to, but usually most, you know, if I have a mentor or a mentee and I don't think any question's stupid because everybody has that question at some point, like, you know, like how do I register or something simple. And I think most of those programs are free. So if you're in the association, feel free to take advantage of those things. Whether you're a student or even after you graduate, you know, a lot of people, I had a fun time for the Llama, I signed up for the mentorship program and somehow both I and the other individual thought we were the mentor. So we had an interesting first meeting because we both kept saying, well, what do you want to know? Anyway, so and we decided neither one of us had time to just play around, but it could have been, you know, we both could have learned something too. But anyways, but that's good too because you volunteered, but then you didn't end up being needed. So. Okay. So a lot of my work with MLA and ALA led to, I volunteered to be each state or most states, the association like Michigan Library Association is a chapter of the American Library Association. So that's how we have the joint membership program. Are any of you members of, okay, I see a couple. I know $42 is $42, but it's a lot less than the $300 I pay per year. So if you can, I mean, literally, if you have a bake sale or whatever, if you can scrape up the $42, that gets you into the National Association and the State Association. And then you get discounts on everything else, like, you know, when you register and stuff. So it really is worth, especially even if you join and never go to the National, there's like the state conference this year will be in Novi this fall. So it's not too far for most of us probably in Southeast Michigan. And that has its own costs, but there's scholarships and so really, I know money is money, but if that's the only thing holding you back, talk to, Kim and others, talk to me, help me find some money. Because there's state money to help people go to conferences. There's, people that even might want to fund a membership if you really can't afford it, but don't be afraid to ask. So anyways, the state chapters they plug into the national level. Sometimes there's contention between the two, who's controlling what. But really, I think Kathy and I have both been like, people need to stop being adversarial and just figure out how to work together. So I got plugged in, well, I got on the MLA board originally, the Michigan Library Association, to be the state representative, the state chapter counselor for ALA. So I got to be on ALA Council, which they have this huge body of people that govern things. They have their board, which is, like 10 people, but then council is like 200 people. So that was kind of cool because you normally have to get elected to that, and I've run before and never got elected. So I snuck my way in there. Anyways, I'm done with that work, and I'm almost done with MLA as past president. But now I'm plugged into the national level. There's the Chapters Relations Committee, which is cool because they still are trying to get all info back to the states. So I'm working in that capacity now, which is kind of interesting. And they're working on a new toolkit, so you guys can keep your eyes out on, it's a chapter relations toolkit of how the ecosystem toolkit is called, I think. Because we're working on an ecosystem initiative, which is trying to build a coalition and networking from the federal down to the state level of everyone working together. And it's really helped. There's some nonprofit groups, and probably some for-profit groups. What's the libraries? You can get a pin if you donate. They do the like campaigning and stuff. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. We can send it out to the list, I guess. There's actually like paid nonprofit lobbyists now that help any city that's like trying to do a millage or something. So if you're from Michigan or been around for a while, you may have heard Troy Public Library almost got shut down a few years ago. And they are one of the biggest and most popular systems in the state for public libraries. But a national level political party came into the state, into Troy, and did a campaign to not fund the libraries. Leave my hometown alone, right? It's not my hometown, but why are you? And it was just anti-tax stuff. Yes, thank you. Every library. So if you want to check them out, even if you just follow them and stuff, they're always working on campaigns that are interesting. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, I'm again not trying to be political, but in the United States, the libraries have been sucked into the general public notion that everybody is splintering at this point. Everybody's against something, and this is happening. So just as all libraries need to work together, like campaigning is an issue because, elderly people who had a great public school and a great public library and their kids are long gone and they have grandkids now, they need to be reminded that you still need good schools and good libraries if you want your property values to still be good. So it's, nobody is separate. We're all connected in theory. So we either all stay connected or we all go down together because we are connected and we're all going down. But anyway, it's not that bad. But it's kind of philosophical, but libraries are the same as general population is all I'm saying. We need to work together. So Kathy and I could both attest to this as well. It's important for you to persevere in your education and your career and your volunteering and your networking, even when there's failures. So, you might have a whole group that ends up hating you, or you may just really have a bad experience on a committee or something. it's okay, take your time to mourn that or whatever, but move on to the next one because you'll get a good one eventually. And again, that level of respect for everyone. You can disagree with people. I had a board member once that totally did not agree with me on something, but then we would, go to lunch afterward and be like, at the table when we're doing our board work, we're speaking what we think is best for that board, and we may not agree. Outside of that, we can still be colleagues and friends and go have lunch or whatever. So on whatever level, try not to take it personally. I mean, obviously, if you're personally attacked, that's different, but if something fails, it wasn't necessarily your fault, and even if it was, it doesn't matter. You move on to the next thing. And then finally, I wanted to say, keep in contact with your network. So as Kathy attested, she did the Michigan Library Association Leadership Academy. I did as well. And she and I still know each other, and we still know people we met in the Leadership Academy. For both the other person's benefit and yours, to keep those contacts. I think Kathy and I both find it very useful to join email lists. So you're probably all on the SIS email list. You may have it filtered, you might not. But there's a lot of lists, especially when you find a group of people interested in the same topic that you're interested in. Are any of you on the MichLibL list? Okay, I don't see a lot of hands. So MICHLIB-L, if you search that in your favorite search engine, it will pull up the connection. It's free to join, and it's just statewide discussions in Michigan of what's going on in libraries. So again, since you're already started your career, you should be on that list in Michigan, or find a list wherever you're located. Some of it is lame, like, I have 100 rubber bands. Email me if you want to be the first to get them. So sometimes it's entertaining, sometimes it's not. But that type of thing is why you might want to make a filter, so that you can review it once a week or whenever you're looking at that. But that list as well posts jobs. So if you're looking, there's even like, we have a 10-hour-a-week library page. Well, you know what? If you never worked in the library, go take that job because you will have library experience. And again, I already told you, you don't look down on anyone, so don't think too little of that position. It's essential to keep the library running. So join that list. It's free. You better all do it. So that is just an example of a statewide Michigan one, but there's lots of them out there. So if you join MLA or if you join ALA or some other group, they sometimes will automatically subscribe you to certain lists. But all of them have usually a web page that tells all the lists that they offer. And you can try one out, and if you're like, this is awesome, you stay on it for 20 years. Or you can try one out and say, oh my gosh, this is lame, and you get rid of it. So, just keep at it. So joining lists, which may sound like an old medium, but if that's too old-fashioned for you, get on Twitter or something and follow people that are talking about stuff that you want to talk about. You can be part of the conversation if you want, but you don't have to be. So does anybody know who Flula Borg is? He's a funny German comedian guy. Yes, he's hilarious. Anyway, he always wears like fanny packs. He talks about his collection of 35 plus fanny packs. Anyways, I mentioned that because Christy Eklund in our office is a follower on Twitter. So she might post stuff for friends, but she's not like, ooh, I need 1 million followers or whatever. But, she tweeted Flula Borg, tagged him because she saw a funny show that he was on, from years ago before he was famous. And he tweeted back. So she got to talk with a famous person. So, social media can be a pain, but it also can be really cool to get you out there. And certain people in our profession have established whole careers by becoming known as, the awful librarian or whatever their moniker might be. So you can use all those, again, to better yourselves, but also to support other people. If somebody tweets something that's the answer to, go ahead and tell them. Even if they hear it 3 times, they'll be thankful that somebody reached out and said that. So lists or social media in general, you also don't have to participate other than following. It's okay to just read. Sometimes we get frustrated in our office. People say, we want a listserv to do X. That means they all want to sign up. They don't want to contribute. So, you have to get somebody to contribute, so there's some action. But especially the statewide in Michigan, it's very active. Some stuff is nice and some is not, but there's a lot of traffic for you to see stuff even if you're not participating. And they'll just do cool events, like you might find out there's something you would really want to go see for free down the road. So all of those things, whatever medium you're comfortable in, seeing a lot of news or other announcements from other people are very useful for networking. Again, even if you're not actively posting on those, someday you're going to have an important question and you won't know who to ask other than that expert group. And again, don't be afraid. Occasionally you'll get some jerk, I was going to say something worse, but that says, that's a stupid question. But usually several other people on the list will be like, cutting that person off, like, how dare you, the person had a question. So don't be afraid to ask. And again, don't take it personal if somebody is a jerk, because they're the jerk, not you. I already mentioned, but all of this can lead to other endeavors. So, and Kim mentioned it, and Kathy kind of, the work you're doing as students or any project that you were excited about, you need to share that excitement with others. So that can be a poster session. Do you all know what a poster session is? Okay, so don't be afraid of poster session. That's like low level, like you get a lot of credit for it, but you're just sharing your work at a little poster. And only the people that are interested are going to talk to you. So there you go. You've got a captive audience. But like Kim was saying, publishing is important. Even if you're not going into academic stuff, if you have on a resume for sure, like, I published this awesome article, people will be like, wow, this person's doing stuff. But it also just communicates a general message that you are willing to share with other people what is important to you, what you're working on. For any job, like really, your daily work, you should be able to say, I spent a lot of time on this, I'm going to share with other people what came out of it. Even if you don't think it's important or exciting, somebody else will read it and they'll contact you. So you're establishing support for yourself and others. And presenting maybe the lowest on everyone's list of what they want to do. Maybe some of you want to be seen by everyone, but there's different levels of, you can sneak in, like all these interest groups or the roundtables and stuff for ALA. It's awesome to present at an interest group meeting, which is informal, people sitting around like this, but you could say, I did a national presentation at ALA for the whatever roundtable. So that's kind of a cool thing, I think. What was that one we did that we were like, that's not what we thought it was? Some group invited us to speak, and we did, and they looked confused, and we were confused, because the topic they gave us was not what they were expecting. But anyway, that's fine. We moved on. So, okay. I think that's just about everything I wanted to say. I'm just double checking here. So I'll mention that the joint membership once again. There's a lot of opportunity at the state level to do stuff, even if you're never going to go to the national. There's a lot of travel funds in the state from the state library to get you across the state if you need that. Start, if you think the state is smaller, maybe start proposing presentations and other things at the state level to get you started. Some stuff you may never get used to, other things after you do it several times. Like Kathy and I have been at stuff for a while, so we're used, even if we don't feel great getting up here, we're used to doing it at this point. And for real, if the pricing is a problem, talk to me or others to see what you can work out. Anyway, so I think Kathy and I are both happy to take all of your fun questions. We don't want any unfun questions. No, yeah.
So were you always like into the notion of like your students enjoying things and networking like even pre-library life, or did you kind of actually
No. So, sure, I'll repeat the question for online. Did I always have the notion that I should be networked and involved? No, that's the simple. I would say like my first year as a librarian here at Wayne State, in 2005 I came as a systems librarian. Before that I was at a small kind of like solo shop librarian place, and I was not involved in much of anything, in part because I had no money from that institution to do anything. But but I did get good advice at my first job, which I was meant to share today, so I'll mention it. Every year, try to do one professional thing that you can put on your resume. So publish something, speak at something, lead something. That's really important no matter what type of library you're at. It's important not just for your resume, but for yourself to stay involved and excited about something, or to find out something that you end up not liking. So when I came here, my first year as a librarian, at Wayne State, a librarian is similar to being a faculty member. You have to earn your permanent status. Like a faculty would get tenure, you can get permanent employment status for most librarians at Wayne State. Yes. There are some externally funded, like our positions are externally funded, so we can never have tenure because it's contingent upon us bringing in that money each year. But that's, anyways, when the first year I came in, even though I was a supplemented librarian, we still get promotion process based on doing things. And I was at a state level meeting for the users group for a vendor. And they had a call for board volunteers. And my supervisor at the time said, you need to raise your hand. It's getting on something. I knew nothing about it, but I raised my hand and got on that board. Even if you're risk averse, you should just try to do something. Especially try to learn to do things that you're not comfortable doing. It's all right if you fail. I mean, most good supervisors or leaders will be like, okay, you failed. What did you learn? And let's go do something else. Again, you'll get a few supervisors still that are like, okay, you goofed that up, but you just deal. So yeah, no, I didn't have that notion. I still do not try to publish as much as I should, or, usually Kathy and I try to speak at least something big each year. But people think we do a lot more than we do sometimes. Sometimes they think we don't do enough. So I'm babbling, but there was something else I was going to say about it. So no, we didn't always have that notion. So that's why we try to tell people now, go for it. Like, if you're shy, do publishing or something that you don't have to talk to other people. Yeah.
Do you guys belong to any other associations?
Do you belong to any other associations?
In the past, I belonged to the Special Library Association. It became very expensive, so I had to decide what I wanted to do, and I went with the American Library Association.
Excuse me.
For a little bit, I was involved with the Modern Language Association, which has to do with English. I can't say that for the right reason. I got a lot of cool stuff.
Right.
Only like $35.
There's multiple reasons to join different groups.
I got the MLA handbook, and I got discounts and stuff. But I also still found it interesting. Right now, I joined the Detroit Rotary because I wanted to get involved in the Detroit area and try to give back since I've been working in Detroit for 12 years.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of service.
Yeah, and I'm so glad Kathy mentioned that, because we're talking library stuff, but networking is well beyond library land, especially as libraries are trying to become more mainstream in technology, so we're not left behind on different things. So if you're interested in the semantic web, join something to do with that. If you're interested in public service or literacy like Rotary, Kathy is already rose to the top of that group in downtown Detroit, and it's a big group. So again, things that you're interested in. She and I have established careers, so sometimes we have a bit extra money to join a million groups. So you might have to pick and choose more if you're starting out and have, we all have limited budgets. But so in the state now, since I was president of the Michigan Library Association, I joined MIALA, which is the Michigan Academic Library Association. So I'm also a member of that group. I'm also a member of the K-12 group, which is called MAME, which is the Michigan Association of Media Education. So those are there's also a Special Library Association of Michigan. I'm not in that one, but the other three are the ones doing big statewide things. I'm not saying SLA isn't, I'm just not involved with them. And then there are the national groups. It's interesting to note in ALA, 3 of the big group, the divisions like LAMA, is it Alex, and who's the third? No, that are, yeah, there's 3 that are seriously considering, and LITA, which is the Library Information Technology Association. Those 3 are thinking about becoming one division. So that'll be interesting if that happens. Their different boards are having discussion with each other to see. So that may change up a bit, which would really consolidate 3 of the large groups. And then Kathy mentioned the ACRL. I'm a member of that. It's the Association of College Research Libraries, which is the big academic. If you're going into Public Library Association is huge. And a lot of those can be more useful. So there's ALA conference, which is big and grand, but a lot of the divisional conferences may be more relevant to what you're interested in or what work you're doing. If you're doing story time, you want to go to a conference that's all, everybody's talking about that. So there's a great group. Is it time to? Okay. So, any other questions? Okay. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Stephen and Kathy. I really appreciate your time today. And I wanted to mention, too, because we have the new Masters in Information Management, too, and people have been asking me what things to join for that. Certainly there's SIS, but there's also, if you're in a lot of the technology heavy, there's a lot of meetups in your local region. So I would look up those in order to start networking. Those seem to be most productive for folks that are interested in a very specific niche of technology. So I hope you learned a little bit today. We did record it, so we will send out the links online if you missed part of it or you want to come back to something. And we'll see you next year. Thanks, everybody. Good luck.